portion of this video has been sponsored by Loco Dojo Unleashed. They have been kind enough to provide 2 quest keys for the squashy community, entered by the tweet linked in the description. Howdy y'all. Today we are looking at NFL Pro Era, which is the first real attempt at a full-fledged American football game in virtual reality. Prior to jumping into the game and my opinions, I find it's always important to address my experience with the sport in real life. I've lived a life surrounded by football, but definitely not keeping the game central to my life. I grew up in East Texas, the birthplace of Friday Night Lights, went to an SEC college where football is pervasive, and I played on a team for 2 years. Outside of that, I go through the football with friends all the time, and since the game is centered around throwing, I think that I have a very solid background to discuss this. Although this is probably poor for viewer retention, I want to just say up front that I think that this game is not worth the average VR consumer spending the pricey $30 for it at the moment of this upload. The only people who should probably consider it are VR content creators and absolute football diehards. If you're still interested, let me break down the game at a granular level so you can understand why I have these opinions. The game has a full focus on the player being a quarterback for their team. When you open up the game, you'll be taken through a brief tutorial to let you know how to throw and see your plays, and then you'll get sent to your locker room, which is basically just your menu to be able to select the game mode you desire. We will go over those in just a bit, but throwing, which is the primary focus, is done by holding the ball in your hand with the trigger button held, and when you're ready to throw, you make a similar motion as you would in real life, going over your right shoulder next to your head, and then you release the trigger button at the proper inflection point to decide the angle of the throw. That system works fairly well to simulate throwing, but the game overall has its fair share of bugs and frame drops, so you will sometimes be affected by those during your throwing attempts. At the end of your throwing is, of course, the wide receiver that should be catching the ball. This works well about 80% of the time, but there are 2 key items that seem to happen that fall in that other 20%. Either the game glitches out and the wide receiver forgets that there is even a ball in the air. One time a guy just stopped, turned around, and just got hit on the head with the ball. This wasn't like some catch attempt that failed, which I would expect there to be a small amount of. The AI just stopped working entirely. The other issue is that sometimes audibles won't take. At least twice I called an audible, heard the sound go out, and then the wide receiver in a slot went a completely different direction than the play I audibled. If you would rather use a run play, then you have that option open to you. Because you just play the quarterback, these plays are relatively boring to run and don't feel that great to execute. You just put the ball in the hands of the running back and let him do his thing. I would much rather actually play as the running back in these cases. The dev team does seem to be promising to release other player types in the future, so I hope we see running back as one of those primary player types. Even as a QB, your movement feels very slow, which isn't as accurate to real life as I would like it to be. One huge thing that they did get right, however, is the helmet field of view and the large number of interactions a QB has to be aware of and adapt to every play. One thing many people take for granted in real life, especially when just watching football, is the level of awareness that a quarterback needs to the offensive linemen, to understanding what wide receivers are open, and how the defense is collapsing every second of the play. This game gives that perspective surprisingly well, and I think it has shown me that producing football in VR is something that is very, very possible. It just hasn't been done quite yet to the level that I desire. Now, let's get into how these physics are applied to the game and what modes are available to you as the player. The focus here is definitely single player. You start out the game by choosing your team preference, which you can always change later, and then you can customize your character to match your desired look. The graphics in regards to the character, the stadium, and your locker room are honestly some of the best that exist in standalone VR sports games. It does feel like you are really behind the offensive line and playing the game at the initial onset, but the startup tutorial is fairly lackluster in my opinion. It teaches you how to throw a ball, but there are a bunch of little things that you have to infer along the way that honestly should just be explained as you go. For instance, the color that a wide receiver is showing is how open they are. You can't choose your formation, instead you can only audible a new play after the initial play is selected, and you only get the first 3 downs to make something happen for your team before the game auto punts or auto field goals on the 4th quarter. The single player options in the locker room are to practice, play the campaign mode where you go through a season with your team, play an exhibition match, or play a 2-minute challenge with the goal of scoring as much as possible. The practice setup is pretty good and allows you to hone in your throwing between targets and plays effectively. With the practice and campaign mode in front of you, I don't really see the big need for having an exhibition game at the moment. If you want to play a match, then you will likely just want to do it in the campaign, but I'm always happy for the additional options. The 2-minute challenge is fun and would be a great little competition between friends to see what high score you can get. Campaign mode is definitely the highlight of the game, so I'll go over this a bit more in depth. Here you get to rotate between all the teams you need to play against across the season. The games start as a normal NFL game does, with the coin toss and the kick. Once you are on the offense, your team handles the kickoff reception for you, and then you start where they left off. You go down the field with 3 play attempts to get the first down to continue before the game handles 4th down for you. The initial play for each down pretends that a coach called a play which sets your initial formation, and then you are able to change the play with audibles before the shot clock runs down. Only problem with this is that the players don't really move around when you call it, so you're stuck with the AI decided formation. They just have to run the route of where they are based on the audible diagram. Once you're done with the offense, you have to watch the defensive plays run the whole time. There is no way to skip the defensive plays, so that is honestly extremely boring to someone who booted into the game to play, a game. I think I just want more control on how I play the game. I know they're trying to emulate how a real quarterback works, but I'm also playing a video game. Let me also be the coach and call the initial play. Let me decide if I want to try for 4th down, and let me skip the defense simulation since I just have to sit on the sideline and watch. They did have a simulation option, but it seemed like it only handled the offensive plays, like ones where I would actually be playing. And so if that's supposed to work for defense, it was not working in my game. One final item that I haven't mentioned is that there is a fairly robust achievement system in a really cool trophy room that you can view and build your collection in. So that's honestly a big bonus for achievement hunters, those that want 100% a game like this. Multiplayer was definitely an afterthought in releasing this game, as the first 2 times I loaded into a quick play lobby, I was glitched into the sideline with no ability to move or change my location. By the 3rd time I was finally put in a correct multiplayer lobby. They take cues from other VR games like Big Ballers, and they made their lobby social, which I actually like as an idea. Basically this means that you and the strangers, they're chilling on the field, throwing at targets until the host of the lobby decides to start an official game. The bad part is that there are only 3 ways to play, and they're all just short mini games. There's no way to play a full game against a stranger, which is kind of the whole point of the single player game. The options are dodgeball, a scoring challenge against targets, and a boss mode game. These are fun games, but I do wish there was just more around. I think you're going to see this game a lot on content creator pages because the visuals and the idea of a full-fledged American football game in VR is pretty impressive, and it will likely lead to higher sales rates of this game despite the high price of $30 for the game. I'm not unwilling to suggest that a game that is 30 plus is worth it, because even last week I put out a very positive review of IB Cricket at the same cost. But right now this game does not have enough gameplay options nor lack of bugs to suggest this to anyone who is not a diehard football fan and a diehard VR fan. However, I don't want this to be all bad. This game has a really great framework for making something that would work and be worth every single penny, and even worth more than the $30 that it is right now. I hope to see full game exhibitions available in multiplayer quick play. I want to see quality of life improvements during the campaign, things that I mentioned in the physics and the gamification sections, and more position players available for the users to use. Well, thank you so much for watching all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed it, and I would love to hear your opinions in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next week.
Welcome, challenger. Bring your silliest skills. Smash it! Conquer all 16 ludicrous strikes. Looks tasty. Crush your rivals in tournament play. Challenge your friends. Humiliate your enemies. Play alone or compete with others. Clobbered. Easy to play. Tricky to master. Nincompoop. Excellent. Got one. A worthy challenge for contestants young and old. Bring home the bacon. Come on! Whack bats, ride pigs, throw biscuits, crush bugs, stuff moles, punch cactuses, sling snakes, and win. Loco Dojo Unleashed.
Thanks for watching the video. I really appreciate your time and viewership. If you would like to join the community, I host monthly VR tournaments and community nights in my Discord. I would love for you to stop by, say hi, and get involved. On top of that, we are always talking about new news and events in social and casual sport VR. I look forward to seeing you around.